listening to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. I'm your host, Jayne Nakata, a New Zealander living her best life in Fukushima, Japan. I'm a podcast consultant and the creator of Pod Launch with Jayne, a system that helps you create your dream podcast without all the drama and hassle, leaving you more free time to do the things you love to do. This show is for people who want to hear stories of women who are doing amazing things here in Japan and across the world. You'll find loads of inspiration for how you can live your best life wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. Let's get on with the show. Hi, Penny. Welcome to the Transformations with Jayne podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. And finally getting to talk with you.
Yes. We've been planning this episode for a few years. Is it a few years now?
Years now.
Years now. That's right. But it's happening. Yay. So where are you calling in from today?
So I am calling in from the lovely Hunter Valley. This is my first time overseas since COVID. And I'm over here doing a bit of work and doing a bit of play. Mostly work so far. So, and I'm without children.
Without children. Woohoo. Yeah, exciting. Yeah, I'm a little bit envious, but, Wow. So let me introduce you to one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world, Penelope Thompson, who is actually from New Zealand, but in Australia today. And It's really great to have you on the show. I'm very excited for everyone to hear your story. And It's your turn to have the mic today. Yeah. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do. Yeah, that'd be really great.
Okay, sounds good. So, and I also thank you so much, amazing best friend. So it's lovely to finally be able to chat with you. And I was thinking the other day, so we met at university.
First year, yeah.
year. And I have a very specific memory of seeing you for the first time, and I know exactly where we were. And I do think that there are those certain people that come into your lives, and you have always been that for me. And I remember the first time I saw you, and I just immediately, and you were with a bunch of other people, you were in a crowd of people, and I saw you, and I just immediately knew that we were always going to be friends.
And we were in Wellington, right? Obviously. Were we downtown? Going downtown or something? Or were we in
I saw you, we were both at Warehouse.
Yeah. Okay.
And I remember it was on the upper floor and you were in a bunch of people. And it was the first time, and I just immediately, and I'm always strongly led by my gut and by instincts. And I just remember knowing that we were going to be friends. And then look at us, really just a couple of years later, not 20 years plus, etc.
No, that's right. We certainly have a special friendship, and I remember seeing you for the first time as well. So that was, And here we are, 25. How many years has it been?
Maths is hard.
Yes.
We're both still very young, though, obviously. So it's just probably easily a quarter of a century, I think, at this point.
That's it.
But we're still just 18 at heart, right?
Yeah,
nothing
totally.
Internally, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
A few extra life lessons, but other than that.
So when things were going really, really crappy for me here in Japan in 2011, when my house was down the road from a festering nuclear disaster, you were the person who was like, right, what are we doing here? How are we going to, like, even from New Zealand, you were somehow helping me. So we've always sort of been there through big things. And then 4 years ago, I will never forget the day when I got this email from you, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? I will never, ever forget that email you sent to me. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So and it was almost, and it will be on the 15th of July. It will have been 4 years.
Exactly.
I just think in life there's those dates that just chiseled into your brain. And I had been married for 13 years at that point. And I have 3 gorgeous boys. And I'd been with my husband since we were sort of 19 and 20. And then there was just this day where he came in and he said, there's something that I need to tell you. And that was how he said it. And I remember just saying, okay, just give me a moment to catch my breath, because I knew that whatever was, when someone sort of
what's coming next,
and I was like, and I just remember saying, okay, just give me a moment. And I just took a number of deep breaths and I said, just give me a moment. I'm just going to catch my breath. And then I said, okay, what is it? And he said a lot of things, but what I remember most was that he said, I've changed my mind. I thought I wanted marriage and kids and the house and all of this, and I've changed my mind. And then he told me that he was leaving, and that he was leaving right at that precise moment. And
I'm off now. Bye.
I'm off. Yeah. So literally I had 5 minutes where my entire life, as I'd ever known it, and my entire vision for what I thought was my very secure, predictable, laid out in front of me future would look like, exploded. And at that point, I also said, okay, you're not leaving just now. I'm going to go out for half an hour and then I'll come back, because I just needed to leave that space. And it turned out that he'd been having affairs as well. And I had no knowledge of that. And I think the thing is, there's this widely known narrative, right, that you know, or that you must know. And I think the thing with me is that I've always had a really strong sense of self. I've always had a high sense of self-worth. And I do think that self-worth and self-esteem can be quite different. I think I've got quite good self-esteem, but I know who I am and I know the value of me. And I just never thought that anyone would do that to me.
Right. Yeah.
So that was it. So no, I wasn't that person. I've never been checking phones. I don't check emails. Right. I don't question it, because I know that I'm a good person. And I just, when people said, but you must have known, I said, well, why would I ever be wandering around in my life anticipating that kind of a thing to happen, to look for signs? Yeah. And also, I think it's really important to say that he was my favorite person.
Yeah.
And I think the person that I married and spent 19 years of my life with is not the person that person turned out to be. But he was my favorite person, but who he turned out to be, and a number of other things I obviously discovered after the fact, was not the same person.
Yeah.
But so it was the definition of blindsiding. And I was also in a very vulnerable situation, because I was a stay-at-home mum at that point. I didn't earn a single dollar in a year, so I had no source of income. And I had these 3 gorgeous boys, and my youngest was 3 at the time.
Yeah. You had little kids at home,
I had
right?
very little kids, and we can also touch on a little bit more about the boys later, but 2 of my kids are neurodiverse, on the autism spectrum. All of my children have quite complicated medical backgrounds. I had spent a lot of the sort of 19 years that I was at home in Starship, which is our local Auckland Children's Hospital.
Yes.
Doing things like having children have brain surgery. As a family, we have an ambulance membership. So, in addition to play dates and baking, that was my role. To keep these children alive.
Yes, keep the children alive in a very real sense on a daily basis.
In a very real, we've had multiple life-threatening protocols with these particular children.
I've not heard of an ambulance membership, but I can imagine it's $50 a go or something, isn't it? Right? If you need
I think it's like $80 or $90. And they're like,
now it is.
At this point, we should just have a membership. And I was like, that is absolutely what I thought I was going to need in my life, like a gym membership, an ambulance membership, one subscription.
Good God.
So that's what happened 4 years ago. It was literally, it feels like, chapters of a book. And that my entire life as I knew it changed within a 5-minute period. So there's kind of like the before stage and there's the after stage. And I've always, loved words and my career, I work in public relations, but quotes have always been really important to me. And there was one at that time, there were two quotes that were really important to me, but the first is a C.S. Lewis one that I really latched on to, which is the idea that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and you can change the ending. Yeah, you can't go back and change the beginning. So, you know, you don't know all of the things that you know at the middle piece. Yeah. So you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and you can change the ending. And I think when something as devastating as this happens, and it was devastating for me, but also so devastating for my children. And I just had a really strong sense that you can't control other people's behavior. You can't control the things that happened to you. Yeah. Very rarely can you, but I, you know, it really put a fire in my belly, and I just felt I'm not going to allow anyone to change the outcome of my family's story or dictate what that is going to look like. That's not who I am. I will not allow that to happen. And I'm going to show these children what it looks like and what we do when hard things happen. And I'm going to walk them through this, and we are going to create the most amazing, glorious life for ourselves that is better than anything that I could have imagined. And it was doing that while also just living in the just visceral devastation of something like that.
Yeah. So many goosebumps there. Did you tell me that, was it your grandfather who used to hang out with C.S. Lewis or something?
Yeah.
In Oxford back in the old days? Am I remembering that right?
True. Yes. So my grandfather went to Oxford University after the war, and he was at Merton College, and he was at Oxford at an amazing time. So the system they have at Oxford is they have a tutoring system, but it's someone who's kind of responsible for your group, and his person was Tolkien.
Oh, Tolkien, right.
Yeah. Yes. It was very good friends with Tolkien, but, you know,
as you do.
As you do. He knew C.S. Lewis. He, you know, would tell him stories about going into the Bodleian Library and seeing him there. And
wow. Yeah. And that quote stood out to you from
C.S.
Lewis. That's kind of like goosebumps. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So your life blew up in 5 minutes.
It did.
The life that you thought you were going to have blew up in 5 minutes. And you came eventually, not like 5 minutes later, you didn't come out the other side, but you came out the other end. And so tell us some of the things that have happened since that time and how you made it work for you. And we talked a little bit before we press record about having like a divorce coach or something, and how you thought that would be necessary, and those things don't seem to exist. Why don't they exist, especially for women, right?
It's absolutely. And I think, you know, growing up, I hold marriage in really high regard. My parents, you know, my dad obviously recently passed away, but my parents were married for 52 years. There kind of wasn't divorce in my family. I think, so I didn't have examples of it to refer to or to know how this might work. And I think one of the things for me is I don't view marriage as perfect. I don't have this sort of magical princess view of it. But what I do have is I just think it's like life's greatest self-improvement program. It's like, you know, it's only on steroids. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's a commitment, and it's knowing that you change so much in your life. But for me, it was like, this is a self-improvement program, a marriage, and you work with, and it's a partnership, and it's a teaming, and I think the thing for me is I am idealistic at the best of times, but I'm also very much a realist. So we had a deal when we wanted to get married, and I was married at 25. And that deal was that, hey, we're very young. It's highly likely we're going to come across other people who kind of float our boat in life. But we had a deal that if that were to happen, that we wouldn't pursue that without first having a conversation with each other. And I've mentioned that to people now, and they find that just bloody hilarious. And I'm like, I would have done that.
Right. my side, that seems like something I would do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely something that I would that I would have done.
Can we just stop? And I just need to say, there is no more loyal person than you in the whole wide world. And unfortunately, you didn't find someone as loyal to partner with. And right. So I'm cheerful here, but yes. Anyway, moving on. What were we talking about?
Moving on. I did. And I think there were a lot of ways in which I did that. But I just remember I had this really clear image of myself as being like a tree. And I was just like, I am strong and I'm stable and my roots are deep. And I just remember kind of watching him. It felt like him just whirling around like leaves. I remember just thinking, I'm just going to stay very, very still. And I'm going to get my ducks in a row as fast as I possibly can. So what that looked like for me, so this happened on a Sunday. I then found the best divorce lawyer in the nation and managed to get an appointment with her on a Tuesday. But, there are those funny moments because I just think, what's life without humor? But I remember going and turning up in her offices, and I had to have a friend drive me because I was a bit deep in trauma at the point. And she said to me, I gave my story and I said, right, so we just need to get this sorted. We just need to get this sorted. Yeah. And she said, right, so when is the separation date? And I said, Sunday. And she said, what month, what, and I was like, no, it was Sunday.
2 days ago, Sunday.
Absolutely. I was like, let's get this done. Yeah. Because I knew that I needed to move really quickly to shore things up. I knew I was in a very vulnerable situation. Yeah. Yeah. And what it also looked like for me, having not worked in so many years, is I reached out to everyone I knew in my industry who was now in a hiring position. And the irony of that is a lot of those people had been people who had been reporting to me, but had actually continued their careers.
Right.
Yeah. And I just went out. And I think that was the thing. I kind of, in my life, have a shame-free policy. So a lot of people, when they were honest with me, said, weren't you embarrassed that this had happened to you? Like, didn't you just feel humiliated? And I said, I totally understand that kind of thinking. Yeah. But I'm choosing not to feel like that. Like, I did not do this. The fact that someone else did this to me, I choose to not feel embarrassed and humiliated. I think there are two options, and I've seen a bunch of friends do both. One is you completely go to ground. You don't want anyone to know what's going on because it is embarrassing. Like, there's no way to say that this is not an embarrassing thing to have happened to you.
Sure.
But I just decided in my instance, I'm going broad. And by that, I mean, I'm a huge believer in the village. I was aware of the degree to which I needed help, and whether that was I needed help to get gainful employment or with the school. And I just decided I'm not going to hide in this situation. I am going to let people know what is going on. I am going to encourage them to reach out and offer to help. And every single time that someone offers me help, I'm going to say, yes, please. And so that looked like everything from, like I said, reaching out to people. And I just was really honest and said, hi, the shit has hit the fan. Here is what has happened. I need to start working again. I'm aware I've been out of this for almost a decade. Can we catch up? Can we meet? And I think I know that fundamentally I'm a really good person. And I think I know what my work ethic is. I know the career I had built for myself beforehand. And I think it's also remembering people want to help, and it doesn't matter how long you've been out of that, who you are as a person stands. And so really quickly, I had a number of job offers. I was back working within 2 weeks. I was back working.
Right.
Yeah. And from a school perspective, it just looked like I just said, can I have a meeting? And I just went in there and I spoke to the principal and I spoke to the deputy principal and I said, here's what's happened. I need you to know what's happening in my life right now. I'm just going to be I'm an open book. Ask me any questions you can have. I would love your advice on what I should do. Please let me know. I will make all final decisions. So nobody worry about if I choose to do the right thing, that it's coming back on you. But please tell me what you think I should do.
Yeah. What did the school say to you about it? Like, as from their perspective of seeing multiple children going through this sort of situation.
I remember they cried.
Oh, did they? Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, you were very close to your children's school. You help out a lot, and you're there a lot. So they know you. You're not just the parent who comes occasionally when they absolutely have to, right?
And I think that was the thing, that they were just, a lot of people I think were quite devastated on my behalf.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I was just very vulnerable. I'm a huge believer in, vulnerability is our greatest strength.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, that one of the things that I felt so hard is I felt okay with how I was doing.
Right.
But I hated having to tell people, not because of the shame thing, because we've put that to the side, but because of seeing their faces. And that's the stuff that just seeing when you tell people how devastated they are on behalf. And that was the thing that would always make me cry, is not that I was going through it, but just seeing the pain in other people's faces. Like that was actually probably the hardest thing. Yeah, and I did other things as well. So obviously I had to get back working. I was very open to school. I was very open, as you know. I was like, hey, just flicking you an email for a course.
This happened.
My entire life just exploded. Here are the details. Any advice? But I did other things. I wanted to know that I was giving this my best shot.
Right.
Which, even saying that's hilarious. But so what I did is I spoke to a child psychologist very quickly. And because my children are on the spectrum, there's an amazing resource in Auckland called Rainbow House, where they have child psychologists that specialise in children on the spectrum and ADHD. So I reached out and said, I need to come and see you. And I said, I just want to know, I know this is not going to be pretty. There's no way it's going to go well, but I need to know that I'm trying to do this the best that I can. And I want to know that I'm wrapping all of the supports that I possibly can around my children.
Yeah.
So what that looked like is I booked in a running weekly appointment with them, and whichever child was struggling the most at that point, or even if they weren't struggling, I would just roll my kids in and have them sit with her and talk about what they needed to. And then so I wanted to know that they had the very best level of support around them. It also looked like my sitting in a session with the amazing Kate Eastman and saying, how do I tell these children?
Yeah.
Because it's all of these other things that you don't think about. Like, they don't know yet what has happened.
Yeah. How are they to understand this situation? Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that on the fly. I wanted to have a script. And again, part of that probably speaks back to my public relations background. I was like, what are the key messages? What are the key messages and what are we saying? So I literally worked out bullet points with her. I rehearsed saying it. I memorized it. And to then tell the children what was actually happening. Yeah.
So 4 years has passed since the day, it's been an up and down 4 years, that's for sure. There's been some horrifically low times and some really great stuff has happened as well.
Yes.
But I've watched you just take this and just go, if there is anything I'm going to ace, it's going to be this. And it's been amazing to watch and so inspirational. So I hope that for people who are listening, who are potentially going through the same thing or about to go through it, or something, that they will get some ideas for how you can, go through this situation. And let's seriously, can we get some divorce coaches happening?
Well, this is what we were saying, right? Is that it's a path that you ignore. I don't think there's many people that go, right, as my backup plan, now that I'm married, let's plan for what getting divorced might look like, and always keep that in the back of our minds. And I had people who I reached out to who had been through this and who were like mentors for me that said, here's what you need to do from the practical side. Like, here are the numbers for the divorce lawyer. Here are the people for getting your house valued. Here is what this all kinds of looks like. Here is the paperwork. But then they were also like, here's what it looks like to parent. And for me, very quickly, I embraced the term independent mum, because I hate solo and I hate single. And the reasons for that
let's talk about this rebranding that happened.
Rebranding. We are independent mums So we're not solo because we're not doing it by ourselves. I have the most broad and deep support network.
Yes.
I'm not by myself. I'm not solo. And I also don't really like single because I don't see that my relationship status has any relevance to my mothering.
Right.
You know, I'm an independent mum and I'm forging this path forward with my children independently. I'm not doing it solo by myself. And I mean, I'm not single now anyway, but that's irrelevant to my mothering.
Yeah, right. Like, why are we putting your relationship status in there with the parenting?
I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So now things are looking very different. Like, obviously you are able to travel. I mean, you have three kids. You have this network that you have created that lets you travel when travel's allowed, which is, starting now. You do amazing work. You recently helped do a music festival, wasn't it? I saw you up there.
I did. I've recently moved to an amazing company called Māia, and they are Aotearoa, New Zealand's home of kaupapa-driven communications. So for anyone listening, kaupapa is about your values and your purpose. And all of the clients that we work with are purpose-driven. They have a greater why behind their organisations and what they're trying to do. I think for me, it was really important to start to do some work that made a real difference. I've always done pro bono work as well with different organisations because I'm aware that public relations is quite a skill set and that the people who need it the most are often the people who can't afford it. So I've always done pro bono, which is partly to make myself feel better about that a lot of the work, historically is about making corporates even more money. And I'm like, they don't need me to be the person to do that. So I think you get to a point in your career where you want to be doing things that have a greater why behind them. So that's 100% of the clients that we work with meet that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the organizations you're working with there. They just look really great. And that music festival you were like helping run, that I'm like, I'm too old for this. How are you doing this? Like, I'm feeling exhausted just looking at this, what's going on at this music festival.
And so that was with the far north iwi called Ngāti Kuri, and it was the Hikoi to 100 campaign. It was all about working with the iwi to increase their vaccination rates because COVID in New Zealand, we were finding that particularly within the Māori community, their vaccination rates were just that bit lower. And it was an aspirational target. They're the iwi that first used the term Hikoi. And it was about turning activism into actionism. It was very much them working with their own people rather than people from outside coming in. And it was a huge success. It was also about building iwi resilience because I think we all know the history and particularly the history with this particular iwi with pandemics has been appalling. When you think about the Spanish flu and tuberculosis, it was about more broadly building that iwi resilience. And one way we look to do that is particularly with rangatahi, who are the young people who aren't as interested, we know, as getting vaccinated. We came up with this idea to hold a music festival. There's never been a music festival that far north before.
Right, yeah. It's a very natural area of Japan, New Zealand, sorry. It's a very natural area of New Zealand up there. There's not much, right?
No. So it was up north in Kaitaia, and we partnered with Dawn Raid. We managed to get the most amazing musicians and acts to support the kaupapa. So everyone from Shefu to Savage to Lady Six to Jackson Owens. We had some amazing people, and Brother D, who was also involved in that, and everyone really got behind the kaupapa. And the scenario was that you had to be double vaxxed to be able to attend. It was about creating a safe space for people to start to be able to come back together again, which was really important for that iwi. And it was a way to do that. So we had 3,500 people in the Aotearoa Rugby Club field.
Is that where it was? Yeah, right.
I went to the rugby club, and it was amazing. And it was amazing. It was the first music festival that New Zealand's had since Omicron, and I think it's really fitting that the far north is the tip that points Aotearoa out to the rest of the world. And myself finally being overseas for the first time, it was about more broadly Aotearoa exiting and reaching back out to the world again.
Yes. Yay for that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so let's segue into your boys, your beautiful 3 boys. And so if anyone does parenting well, it's Penny. You really inspire me with your enthusiasm. Not only do you do your career so well, but also the way that you love and parent your boys is amazing. And you mentioned before that 2 of them are on the spectrum.
Yes.
But there are 3.
There are 3 entire people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
and the oldest one is 30.
Well, that's the thing. Do you know what's so complicated? I know. Well, see, like every damn year the ages change, and so it's
like, how are we supposed to keep track of this?
How are we supposed to? He will be 14 in August,
right?
And Mr. Gus just turned 12 last weekend.
Yes.
And Hugh is 7.5 because the half's really
important. Don't forget the half. Don't forget
important. The half. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So tell us about them.
My 3 amazing boys. So I was always that person that had desperately looked forward to becoming a mum. And, I was that person growing up where I would just be able to sniff out if there was a baby in the neighborhood, and would sort of be sitting on their doorsteps just waiting for them to bring the baby home.
Hi,
hi, would you like some free childcare?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's different for everyone, but for me, I know being the mother to these particular children is my vocation. I firmly believe that that's why I am here on this planet, is to be a particular mum. And it's something that I tell them, each night when I put them to bed, that, I'm the luckiest mum in the whole world because I get to be their mummy. And they're very complicated and it's complex. So Mr. Elliot, all of my children were born early. So he was born 6 weeks early. So he spent his first 2 weeks in NICU, which is an amazing facility and also highly traumatizing. I still have the thing of the smell, just randomly. There's a smell of disinfectant that must be brand specific. Sometimes I just randomly smell that somewhere, and it's just absolutely brings me back. So, feeding tube and all of that that stuff. And then what I noticed with Elliot is when he was he never ever crawled, which is not considered a developmental milestone, but he didn't have any of those transitional movements. But also, it's your first child.
What do you know, right? Nothing.
This doesn't seem quite right. I'm seeing other children who are doing different things. It's like, he's fine. It's all good. And I'm like, I don't want something to not be right, but I'm seeing something here. So I, really did have to advocate for that. And then he walked when he was 19 months.
Right.
But we also noticed that he had like quite a large head, which I was like, amazing. The child's head is so big because of all the brains. I think that's what he's just so smart. So smart.
Well, he is so smart, isn't he, though?
And then we did, and I was like, I'm sure that I had a huge head. Like I remember all these, isn't that what we just do? We just have big heads. But then we had him assessed, and it turned out that he had a condition called Chiari One Malformation. And the long and short of that, it's when the cerebral tonsils, if you imagine, there's supposed to be enough space for the brain fluid to circulate. That was not the case for him. So his cerebral tonsils dropped down into the spinal canal. So just before he turned 3, he had brain surgery. And what they did is they sliced down the back of the neck and they removed some of the vertebrae to falsely create the ability for the brain fluid to circulate as it should, and they put a spinal catheter or shunt in. But because what happens with this condition is that often there's a pulsing of the brain fluid because it doesn't have enough space into the spinal cord. So he has a syrinx in his spinal cord that probably won't ever go away. He has gross motor delays. He has fine motor delays. Mentally, he's great, but like he's never going to ride a bike. We persevere, but that's probably not going to happen. He can't tie his shoes, those kinds of things. But helpfully, he was also not a particularly sporty kid. It's just kind of not his thing. He's highly bookish. You'll never see Elliot without a book in his hand.
He's always got one, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Somehow he's always sneaking a book around with him.
Yeah, and I have actually, I love so much you saying how you think I'm an amazing mum, and I appreciate that. Also, one, I make up absolutely everything, and it does also include things like removing light bulbs from Elliot's room so that he can't read because he hasn't got any light.
He needs to go to sleep, right? Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's the dedication to the books, isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah. It's and not sleep. So he has that. And then he has anxiety. So 2 of my children are on anxiety medication. And he was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is now obviously doesn't exist. So everything's now autism spectrum disorder.
Right.
And yes, and so that's his situation. Mr. Gus is also autistic, and he also has ADHD. Both of them have ADHD. It's thought that it could be as high as sort of 70% of children who are on the autism spectrum also have ADHD. What else does Gus have? Anxiety. He used to wear a hearing aid. His hearing is just slightly under normal, but at the end of the day, I've never known that kid to not be able to hear anything, particularly any form of whispering. So I was like, let's just move off from it. Mm-hmm. None of my children have eardrums. And then Mr. Hugh is my neurotypical kid, but he's the one that had the ambulance membership. So he had really horrendous asthma when he was sort of between 2 and 3. He was admitted into the hospital at least 7 times. We hung out in A&E for at least another sort of 15 times, just waiting for that period of the virus where Hugh would stop breathing to pass. So complex.
Yes, a lot going on with just that.
Yes.
So obviously this has required you to almost get a medical degree right? And a sort of like a layman's medical degree. There are some people, you've had to learn all these things and also with their ADHD and being on the spectrum, all, not just the physical health, but also, how to help them be successful in this world or, have a good life in this world. You have obviously learned a lot about what it is like to raise neurodiverse children. I think there's coming a time, and I just hear not daily, but so often, my child has been diagnosed as neurodiverse in some way. And me too, by the way, like the parents, right? It's also, and they're in shock as well. But then they're kind of like, so that sort of answers some questions I've always had about certain things about myself.
Absolutely.
So what have been some of the things that you'd like to share that can help?
And I think it's interesting because we talked about, the idea of divorce mentors. I also think that you need, basically, I just think the whole world just needs to partner up in a really broad mentoring system. No matter what.
Lots of mentors.
Lots of mentoring. And that's something I'm actually working with Startup on, because I know at the beginning when you first have this diagnosis, it's such a shock. I think. And it's just it is a journey of going from that, and there is a grief that's involved in it, and it's almost like, I would say, a guilty grief, because no one ever wants their children to know that their parents want them to be anything other than exactly as they are. And in saying that, you also know what the world can be like, and you don't want your child's life to be any harder than necessary. I'm not neurodiverse. And so I was, just worried. It just felt like being repetitively stabbed is how I would describe the emotion at the beginning, because I think you're also being bombarded with so much medical information, which is highly rational, it's highly academic. But then there's this whole other side, that's the emotional side, that you're trying to process while you're still getting minimal sleep because you've got young children and you're still having to do all this other stuff, but just the emotional side of just being terrified of what does it look like. And I think what would be really valuable is, and this is some of the work that I do with families, when I find out, often people say, hey, would it be okay if you could talk to my friend who's just at this stage, is to let them know it is so much better than okay.
Yeah.
It is so much better. This life is so much better than just okay. And it's an amazing life. And the future for these children is just phenomenal. And you just don't know that when you are first told that diagnosis, and they're wanting to just layer all these therapy sessions on you. And you've got occupational therapists, and you've got speech language therapists, and you've got everything under the sun. And I think also the thing is that once you're diagnosed with one thing, you very quickly just become this elaborate Venn diagram of, have you also got dyspraxia? Have you also got sensory processing disorder? Have you got auditory processing disorder? And a lot for me was I get to the point where you say, is this going to change how I am parenting these children? Thank you so much for all of these additional labels and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. Is there a medication? Like, have we also got diabetes? Is there a medication? If so, fantastic, because I'm a huge believer in the value of medication when layered with those other therapies and things. But if it's just going to be another label that's not going to change how I'm parenting my child or my approach, then where is the value in that? I think there's value in the knowledge of knowing, but at the end of the day, you want to just be able to parent your child as very best, so that they can be the very best version of themselves. Yeah. And I think, one thing that we've been talking about that I'm also working on is this idea of happy hormones. So
tell us about that.
Yeah. So it's the idea, and it fits really beautifully, I think, within New Zealand with a te ao Māori view of healthcare, which is the idea that it's not just your physical health. So that there are po, which is what stabilizes your whare or your house, but it's the idea that it's the physical health, but it's also your spiritual health, it's your family health, and it's your mental health. And you need 4 really strong pillars to overall be in good health. You can't just treat the physical, like I was saying, even with the parents, you can't just be giving us the physical information. You've also got to be thinking about, our mental health and emotional well-being of us and our children, because your child does not come separate from the family unit. So it's about all of that.
Yeah.
And one thing is around the happy hormones, and it's something, so you think about, and how I did it, because again, probably my background in PR and branding and things, is I just think of it as a dose of happiness, because helpfully dose covers off the 4 happy hormones that you want to be looking to get.
Right.
So those are the 4 different hormones, and there's lots of different ways that you and your children can get those, and it's about what I'm sort of working with people on is it's different for each child. So I know, for example, with Elliot, I need to just add water. Like I always just think add water for that kid. So it might be running a bath in the middle of the day for him really helps with his natural hormone levels. It clearly drinking water, taking him to a beach, kicking him out when it's raining outside. But for him, that's what that is. Whereas for Gus, a lot of it is music. And dancing to music. Like we have nightly dance parties because we have an amazing disco ball that shoots lights, and that kid just loves any sensory overload, gets into a happy space. And for other children, it's like Hugh's a very physical child. His love language would basically just to be draped on me all day, every day.
Just wear him like a scarf. You'd be happy.
Like some kind of 7.5-year-old baby carrier. That would be his ideal.
Yeah.
Me too, though, to be fair. Like if they have adult sized ones of those, like I'm totally happy to just but so his is hugging.
So they're very different, right? Across the 3 of them. That's a lot to be navigating. Okay, you need some touch, you need some water over here, you need some music, right? But
there's also, if you go online and Pinterest and all these other amazing resources, there's printouts on them that suggest what they are. But it's kind of almost like a checklist. Like if I can see a kid, one of the kids is not quite right, and I've kind of got that, that mummy spidey sense, then I'm like, okay, you got your list, go check your list. Which one of those are you going to do? Because but it's also for parents, I think, as well, because we know if we are in the right space, then we can be our best selves for our children, for our friends, for our communities, for our careers. And so for me, it's knowing that too. So things like just put in incredibly loud music that I will play
for yourself.
For myself. And then children will still be talking at me, but I can't hear because I'm listening to my music. It's knowing running for me is really important. I'm that person that gets the running high. It's knowing what it is for yourself. As well.
Your list, making your list. What do you call these lists? Have they been branded in a certain way?
Well, it's just your dose of happiness. Have you had
your dose of happiness list that you make a list? Yeah, I really like that. Like even, neurotypical kids could really get a lot from having a list like this. Everybody has bad days, so.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
having a list.
It is. And it's about teaching, we want whole children going out into the world to become adults. And part of that's about that, knowing how to regulate yourself. And, no one wants to feel like crap. And there are just having that kind of checklist of knowing, okay, but have I done this? And on those really busy days, being able to go, have I done these things? Have I done these things that I know put me in my best state? And, I was talking about how there are quotes that I love. And another one for me is, it's actually a Glennon Doyle quote, but and I think it speaks to helicopter parenting and all that stuff that we all naturally want to actually be doing. But paraphrasing, she said, our job as parents is not to shield our children from the fires in their lives. Our job is to point our children in the direction of those fires, walk them through them, and show them that they are fireproof.
There you go. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Like, don't send them off on their own to walk through the fire, or say that's not a fire. That's another one.
There's not a fire. And I think that's it. It's like, people always talk about how children are really resilient. I don't agree with it. Children aren't resilient. People aren't resilient. The only way, I think people say that, particularly in my situation, to try to make you feel better. But I'm all about the truth and facing that. My feeling is that resilience is like a muscle group. The way that you build resilience is by having to go through scenarios that test you. It's literally like a carried, and it's a bloody heavy weight, isn't it? But that's how you build that muscle, is because you have to go through it. You can read as much as you want about it, or lovely children books that, talk to them about it. They become resilient because they have their resilient muscles built up. And the only way to do that is to show them those fires and to say, this is how we do hard things. I'll walk through this with you. That's how you build resilient children, I believe.
You said it. That is like, boom, mic drop moment there. Thank you very much. That's awesome. Yeah. So if people have been listening to you today, Penny, and are like, she's fantastic, I need to hear more from her, can people get in touch with you? How can they do that if they want to ask you a question? Or
I'd love that. Probably the best space is either I've got an email account that people can feel free to email me on, and also you can find me on Instagram. So it's just Thompson_Penelope is on Instagram.
If you have an email you'd like to send Penny, please send it to me. I'll pass it on if it's appropriate, and then we'll
if
get you in touch with her.
2,000 pictures of my children. That's on Instagram.
Your Instagram's pretty wild. There's some pretty wild stuff going on what the boys are getting up to and things. And occasionally fabulous stuff like hosting, helping to host what is it, that music festival thing, or going on trips to Australia, which is so exciting. Yay.
And speaking on a podcast from the Hunter Valley in my hotel
room. Right? How awesome is this? Japan connecting to the Hunter Valley today. Very good. I've never been to Hunter Valley. I've been to Australia about 6 times, but I haven't either. So first time. Oh, thank you so much for coming on the show today and being so honest and sharing your experience of many hard things that have happened over the last, since
4 years.
Elliot came along, and particularly in the last 4 years. But look at all this knowledge that you have now, and it's your time. It's your time to use that knowledge and help others, which I know you love to do. So
I absolutely love to do that.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.